picture this. You walk into a brand new LGS for the first time, new city, or maybe you just moved in. You walk in to find, to your surprise, as a constructed player, the room is filled with commander players. You walked in on a Friday night expecting maybe standard or modern, but to your surprise, there's no constructed players there. I find that this may be a rising experience for many players. As the popularity of commander has bloomed over many years, I think many LGS players out there have moved over to that format, and many LGSs in general have seen a rise in participation in commander players and maybe a decrease in constructed. There's been discussions over the years about the death of paper standard. I mean, that's probably thanks to Arena and the ability to play quick games, but also with the decreasing popularity of other constructed formats, let alone in North America. It's hard enough to get LGSs to adopt Hopper into their stores. It's also the decrease in modern that I find really problematic for me as well. I find that with a post that I've seen recently on Reddit talking about my LGS is dying and the owner refuses to save it, I wanted to go through the post and maybe talk about some of these similarities that I'm facing in some of the LGSs that I see here in Toronto and how that might be mirroring some of the experience that some of you might have, and walk through the pros and cons of this experience for a lot of LGSs and players out there. This is the post in question. If you wanted to read all the responses, it's kind of available down below. But my LGS is dying and the owner refuses to save it. So I want to start by saying my LGS is smaller with around 50 or so overall players and 8 to 20 players there on any given Friday or Saturday. Over the last year or two, all the players have shifted to playing CDH or casual commander, and as a lot of people have, which is fine, but we don't have any standard or modern players anymore, and FNM hardly ever fires off now. When the store runs commander events for FNM, we have a large showing. Sometimes when we draft or do sealed, we can get 8 players to combat the downfall of normal formats, which, okay, so there's a little bit of bias here, you know, again, calling constructed formats normal formats and commander not being so, he kind of gets a little bit of bias off of this. So again, to combat the downfall of normal formats in the shop, we've done some strange events like Singleton Modern, which went really well, but we have not done that in a while. Lately, the owner has been very open about hating Commander and trying to force Standard and Modern into FNM. The problem is we have done months now without even an event firing off. Everyone just comes in and plays Commander. The owner will not waver. He refuses to do Commander events and is taking a toll on the store. Players are shopping less there, and he's even isn't getting income from events or any new players, which again is a bit of a problem, especially when you think about like the WPN requirements. For those of you that maybe are more involved at your LGS work there or know the goings on, the WPN requirements are pretty aggressive. You have to have active active events, have people constantly registering, and every year you have to meet a requirement of new people coming in. So it's very, you know, and that can be great when it comes to Commander, because you obviously want to incentivize Commander players to bring their friends in, they register for a WPN account, and that can count as a new player entering your store. And that's like very important too. So there is like plus to this, but the economics of it can be a bit of a downside. Players are shopping less there and isn't getting income. I know I can't do anything. This whole thing sucks, and I don't want to lose my LGS. I guess I'm just here to grieve. I love Commander, by the way, and this isn't a post to talk bad about any formats. I too find myself just going to the store to play some CDH, though I always try and play in whatever event is being pushed. So again, a player that's more in franchise. If you're a CDH player and you're saying you frequent your LGS and play whatever event is being pushed, you probably have access to more cards. So this might be, you know, something that you feel more. And so I think like initially comparing this to my, you know, one of my LGSs that I frequent, I think like they're not in that type of similar situation. They push a lot of events outside of Magic. They have a couple of other games that they play as well. Notably One Piece is one of them. And when it comes to like inviting these other events, a lot of people do show up to them. So it's not just about the amount of Magic players that are coming in. They are spreading their reach, and that's important in this day and age, especially in the bigger cities. But in smaller towns like this, maybe smaller LGSs, they're saying the LGS is smaller, you may not have the capacity or the overhead to be able to push these other type of events. You might be focused on Magic. And so you see a lot of Commander players come in. And now inherently, again, that's not bad because volume is very important. It can feel really empty when you walk into a mall in the morning, and it may not feel like, you move to a new area, new part of town, you walk into the local mall, feels empty, and you're like, ooh, like, is no one here? And you might just be there at a bad time. I think people feel a lot better about places, and this is probably psychological, when they walk into a restaurant and there's more people there. It makes them feel like, oh, I'm in like a place that's frequented. And the overall feeling of that is different based on like introverts or not. But like, for those of you who know, I'm not here to talk about the bean soup stuff and people that are on the fringes. Generally speaking, I feel like a lot of people feel better when more people are there because they feel like they made a good decision to come to a good restaurant or something like that. And I feel like that's true for LGSs. You come in, you see a lot of people playing, you're like, wow, there's a lot of people here. Maybe I should get involved and kind of come here because I can generally find games. And that's what Commander players help do. They do take up a lot of space. And I say that in a positive way because Commander in a pod generally require 4 people, and so 4 people is about 2 kind of constructed games going at the same time. And if you get maybe 3-4 pods, you get an equivalent amount to 1 constructed event firing. The amount of people equivalent to that is maybe like 4 or 5 Commander pods, which is a lot more variety, a lot more conversation. Whereas in a constructed environment, it might just be people saying, play land, do this, pass. Whereas in a Commander environment, there's a lot more conversation happening where folks are talking politics, they're talking about, oh, what you're doing, can I read that card, stuff like that. There's more conversation. There's more of a buzz in the room. There's more electric. And so that type of community aspect, again, is also very good. So there's a lot of good things, I think, about this at first glance. But I think breaking it down can be where we get our potential problem. And that's kind of what I want to posit today. So I'd go ahead and get everyone's contact information because it sounds like you're going to need to find a new place when this place shuts down, because I think openly hating Commander is definitely like a bad thing. And we don't know anything about the owner itself as to why they're doing that. Maybe it's because they're losing money. Maybe it's because they personally are more of a constructed player in that aspect. And maybe, I don't know, maybe they're just in it for the money and Commander players aren't paying, which I'll get into in a second. But you always, as a business owner, want to do what's best for your business. And it's not just about openly hating. It's about adapting to the people that come into your store. It's why a lot of grocery stores can be kind of owned and franchised out. For here in Toronto, you can get no frills and stuff. So you see people that like own different no frills, but you'll see the food and the certain items available are different based on certain no frills that you go to, certain grocery stores. And so you'll find more ethnic items in certain neighborhoods, and you'll find less ethnic items in other neighborhoods. So I know that being in the city for a very long time, if I need to find certain foods, I can't go to certain no frills because they don't have the variety that I need to have the food that I want. And so that can happen at something like LGSs, where you may only have Commander players, but then you adapt to the environment around you, the people that come in, and you have events that curate towards them. And you can then maybe find a way to make money off of these folks to make sure your business is able to continue. Small businesses that operate on emotional principles rather than identified demand are generally doomed. As I was just kind of talking about, identified demand. And so how do you get these Commander players to ultimately help your business and purchase materials, purchase product to make it look to Wizards that you are a successful operating LGS, and to distributors to show that they should give you product and everything. And that's different like market strategies that I don't really want to go into too much depth here, but that's really what it is. And so if we kind of scroll down here, I kind of uploaded some of the posts that I was looking at. I understand it from a financial aspect. Commander players don't quite spend as much due to the format being free to enter. Your store could always have an entry fee, whatever the price of regular pack of the current set is, and basically just sell a pack to make some of the capital back, but that doesn't go very far. And I think that's also very tough to do because I think, again, the format being free, it's a very inviting format to come into and not have to pay for the space, right? Like a lot of LGSs out there that I know of provide that free open space. I know, again, face-to-face games generally does that as well. You can come in, you can play a game with the group, and generally what they ask is like, hey, if you're here for hours, like, you know, if you're there for like a little bit, whatever, they're not going to push you. They make a lot of money outside because they are a bigger LGS. But if you are there for hours, they probably want you to, heck, go buy like a snack or something, right? Like support the space that you're in, because that's how they kind of keep the lights on and everything. And so when you add that type of price, that can be hard for commander players, but maybe you can incentivize in different ways. Like maybe you add like, okay, if you come here, like, oh, I'm going to give off a free cheap promo, right? I'm going to randomly draw, everyone gets a free promo, and that kind of keeps people in. It keeps people going for a while. And if they're there for a while, then, you know, you have them purchase the drinks that are there and everything. I think a lot of businesses, it's fair to say like, hey, no outside food or drinks. And if you wanted to eat, feel free to leave and go eat. Otherwise, if you're here, purchase some of the snacks or the food that's available in the business. And I think that's a great way to keep people in. They're there for promos, they're there for that or whatever. And then they're purchasing some of the food that's available there, some of the drinks, snacks, whatever it might be, and maybe higher end foods if you're a cafe as well and you have that serving license. And so that could be one way that you get more folks in there to make up for the free aspect of it. Because when it comes to constructed formats and draft formats, I think like it's very clear to see that when it comes to draft formats, that's more so profitable. The margins might be a little thin, like maybe the packs themselves cost up to like 12 to or 11 to $12, and you pay and you charge the person like $15 for an entrance of a draft. You give them 3 packs and everything. Margins might be thin, but you get people in, you get product moving, and you show your distributors and Wizards of the Coast that you are selling product. And that's very important as well. When it comes to constructed players, you get movement in the store in terms of your money, where you charge someone a $5 to $10 entrance fee, and then you can provide them with packs at the end. You can provide them with store credit. You can provide them with whatever price structure you want at the end that is appropriate to the amount of people that come in and the amount of rounds that you have. And so again, those people pay into that environment. That's another form of steady income. You're not getting that from the the commander players. And so you just have to find a way to manipulate that and change that to change that in a way that works for you. This person that posted talked about CEDH, and so a lot of CEDH tournaments can happen as well, hosting those tournaments, different promos, different pricing structures and stuff like that. Like, maybe you could get pots where, based on the amount of people that come in, the pot increases. So it could just be 8 people, but hey, if you invited your friend, that's one more person, the pricing at the end increases because some of that entry goes into the pricing. And so that's a really good way, I think, that incentivizes people to purchase that. That's kind of like that for those of you Dota players out there, the international pricing structure of old, where they don't do that anymore. But essentially, when the yearly world tournaments happened, what you could do is buy the yearly kind of battle pass. You get these crazy skins, all this stuff, a lot of good value for the player. But then some of the entry that you paid into goes into the final pricing structure. And so you would see multi-millions of dollars, like tens of millions of dollars, go towards the winners. And so crazy big prize pools, high stakes, lots of values for the player, lots of good content to watch off of and everything. And so that's a good way to incentivize pricing structure for CDH players, at least taking advantage of that competitive aspect of Commander. Shop owners have a strong incentive to push new product. Standard draft sells a lot more packs. Fair enough. Draft, in my opinion, is a lot more fun than standard. Surprised he's not doing that. And I think the original poster says he tried, but the commander players don't want those cards, so they don't draft. They usually just come to play in the commander events and buy up every high-end single that hits the display case. He can't keep a commander staple in the display case, even as Mox Diamonds and LEDs sell the day they're brought into the shop. And so that's kind of good too. I will say the fact that commander players at this LGS tend to be buying up a lot of the high-end singles is also really great as well. But I find that might not be true for all these LGSs that have commander players come in, because the poster mentioned competitive EDH players, especially some of the cards that they're mentioning, Mox Diamonds, Lion's Eye Diamonds, like these are CEDH cards, are high-end legacy staples. And so with the poster saying not a lot of constructed players are coming in, I imagine these cards are being sold to CEDH players. And so those are more enfranchised players. I think those are a lot more rare. And if that's what's selling, you should definitely orient some of your business towards the CEDH crowd. But again, emotion-driven business decisions are not what's going to get you the money you need. Now, the person here saying draft is more fun than standard, that's a biased opinion. I find that draft is definitely not a popular format for a lot of casuals. It's very difficult to get into. There's a high cost of entry, and it's very, like the skill floor, very high. Very, very high. I find skill floor is high, skill ceiling is very high. Draft is not an accessible format. It can be very fun for a franchise player. It can be very skill testing, which is why I think like that middle ground is definitely like Vintage Cube, or like you know, the skill floor is a lot lower in the sense that you just have generically powerful cards. So if you are a relatively enfranchised constructed player, you can recognize powerful cards, draft those, do okay, and then kind of learn from there. But if you're just going to a random 3 packs of one standard environment draft in play, that's not going to be something that's accessible at all. I do not think draft is accessible to someone who's tried draft multiple times. It can be fun, but it's definitely an enfranchised player format. Standard being fun or not, again, is another subjective opinion. And I think a lot of standards recently, especially now, a lot of people have talked about how standard is fun right now. Longer rotation may have solved a lot of the problems, especially with MTG Foundations right around the corner. I think a lot of people are talking about the non-rotation aspect of standard, how it's kind of feeling like a modern or a pioneer, where we're getting cards that don't rotate for a very long time. And so standard can be more fun. It just seems to be that right now the popularity of standard is more so on digital formats, but the way they're combating that is with something like Foundations to provide a more secure financial decision for a lot of players, having decks that can last a really long time and have a standard set that can sell, where Foundations is going to come out. A lot of people are going to want to buy Foundations to keep up and be like, okay, if I buy into Foundations, a lot of these key staples are going to be around in standard for a very, very long time, and I can use these as a base for many of my other standard decks. And I think that's going to be the key piece to Foundations, bringing that back into a constructed environment in paper, in person, but it's also going to sell on pay, like online as well. And I think the whole idea of, you know, the alchemy sets and all that stuff, like that's a whole different discussion. I'm going to do a video on that later on the channel about the problem with alchemy that I was kind of made aware of. I never really thought about, but all in all, I think like the constructed formats sell, but Wizards of the Coast is realizing that they're not selling as much, and so they're taking different strategies. And so with that, they realize that that is one of the primary drivers, that their business owners that act as tertiary marketing for their product, it's important for them to be able to sell this type of product, but also sell this kind of premier constructed environment for the people that want this stuff. Not everyone wants to play Commander. Not everyone is doing both. A lot of people are just doing one, especially when it comes to the casuals. So it's going to be really hard for shop owners to push certain product, all product, if it's just Commander players in that sense. And I believe that's kind of, you know, I'll read this off as the last one, but that was the kind of like the last piece that I had there. I learned this from my LGS. Commander and draft aren't profitable. It gets people in the door, and which is kind of what I was saying, like the draft margins are really low. Like you purchase a certain amount from the distributor at that distributor price, and you like mark it up just a little bit, but it just gets people into the store. You can't purchase packs at like $3 and charge people $7 per pack. Like no one's going to buy. They're just going to go to another LGS, or they're not going to play draft. It gets people in the door, but if nobody is buying anything besides entrance fee, the store is losing money. This is why they also host other events like Pokemon, One Piece, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Disney Lorcana. I buy locally majority of the time to keep them running. I hope everyone is doing the same instead of going to a TCG or Card Kingdom for all their cards. To be fair, Card Kingdom is also, you know, Card Kingdom's also a store as well, to my knowledge, and TCG Player does host through other stores, but there's all these problems of fees, and like a TCG Player selling cards is a whole other discussion. But largely here, Commander isn't profitable for a variety of reasons, and that's what I want to go into right now, and also talk about some of the profitability of it as well. Commander isn't profitable because of decrease in revenue. So this essentially means that the vast majority of Magic product right now, draft boosters, play boosters, heck, even you know, the fancy pack boosters with all the foils and everything, those aren't generally bought by Commander players, generally speaking, because it is a free format. It's highly accessible. A lot of people aren't buying the most expensive cards out there. They're buying just, you know, maybe one precon, building it up, upgrading a little bit from there, $50 going, you know, and that's it. That is their deck. And maybe they're building more decks from there, and they're buying more singles, but they're buying those singles and they're not necessarily buying products. So it's a bit of a split. Like you can argue that a lot of Commander players are buying singles, which is helping the store directly, which is kind of purchasing from their own bank of cards that they have in their display case. That's seen as one type of revenue. But I believe from a lot of WP and status stuff and distributor stuff, it's important that packs and product are being bought as well. And that's a different environment. Look, If you want the cards you want, you should buy singles. But if you want to support your LGS, you should buy product. And so that is where the draft environments come in. That is where buying booster boxes for value and stuff come in. And look, the whole idea of like buying packs for gambling and stuff, that's not what I want to promote. You buy what you can buy and what you can afford to buy. Don't make poor financial decisions because you want to buy, like, pull a fetch land off like a Modern Horizons booster box. That's not a good financial decision. Don't do that. But what is good here is that if you want the singles you want, you can buy those singles. At the end of the day though, because if you're just playing one deck and that deck is going to work, you're going to purchase maybe a 30-cent card here, a $1 card here, maybe a $20 card every so often and add it to your deck. And that's how you kind of evolve through your metagame. Not a lot of changes are going to happen. In a lot of commander pods, people have other decks that they'll lend people to borrow around. And so that kind of promotes this environment of not constantly purchasing. Whereas for constructed environments, a lot of times people will get enfranchised into a deck. They'll make upgrades based on the metagame. They'll change their sideboard. They'll buy foils if they're more enfranchised. They're constantly buying like entry fees as well, kind of the $10, $15, $5, whatever it might be. And then they might be looking at the showcase while they're waiting. They're talking about different folks like, you know, what the metagame is. Should I buy these? You know, I'm trying to fix out my sideboard. Let me buy these 2 cards, like whatever. I find that in my subjective experience, the constructed players are doing more active purchasing than the commander players are. The commander players may be purchasing in other ways, but I find that this decrease in revenue specifically is for the vast majority of products, which are the kind of the dual decks, the starter kits, jumpstart packs, play boosters, whatever it might be. Those products aren't being bought by commander players. The second bit is crowding. A lot of times what happens is, like, if you have a very popular commander scene, you are going to find your store crowded by those commander players, which is good and bad. I highlighted a lot of good reasons for that in the beginning of the kind of video here, but a lot of negative can come from trying to run other events. We have, especially at the LGS that I was kind of talking about at the beginning of the video here, not face to face. They tend to have a lot of space, actually, considering most LGSs in the city. But it's hard to run all these bigger commander events and other events at the same time, such as RCQs and whatnot, because space is limited. Not every LGS has spots for 50, 60, 100 people. Some of them only have spots for like as little as like 20 to 25 people in the store. And they have space for like other stuff in their products. They can't house everybody. And so if like whole long tables are being taken up by commander players, they can't house the constructed players that are there maybe for other events like Lorcana, One Piece, heck, even the Magic events, Standard, Modern, whatever. They don't have the space to fire, even if the people are there. And then they're now having to shove out commander players that have been there for a while. Like, how are you going to, you know, let's say you have a Modern event at 6 o'clock, commander players are coming in after work, maybe like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. How are you going to shove out the commander players? I mean, they were there first. They may not be purchasing or doing anything like that, but you know, you could tell them like, hey, we're running a Modern event, people are paying for it, you have to move. But it's a weird business decision to make. It's a tough call. Like, a lot of times that is what happens. Like, oh, these tables are kind of booked off for Modern, we're just letting you know in advance when Modern starts at 6, we're gonna have to get you to move. And so a lot of times that can shoo people away and show like, hey, I can't, this is the only night I can come for Commander, but I can't come here because their Modern event fire, or like they're pushing me away for these Modern players. I don't want to come play here. And so again, that might be a great business decision for that person, because that store owner, because the Modern players are playing more, you know, they're actively kind of engaging, they're playing in the events, they're paying for them, maybe they win some store credit, the store credit is going back into the environment, such as buying singles, buying packs, whatever it might be. But the commander player may not be doing that. So that crowding is a pro and a con. Whether or not it's a full con, I'm not really sold on it, but I do want to mention it in terms of the space being taken up. That is an important aspect to it. And then the variety is what I want to mention. I think this is like, this is another subjective thing here. A lot of it is, I will say this video isn't here to present objective fact. It's just kind of taking this out as personal experience. But I think it's important for a lot of commander players to experience variety. I've experienced a lot of commander players, this is another subjective thing, that don't really know much about the rules of Magic. You know, if you put Dryad of the Elysian Grove and Blood Moon out on the field at the same time, they would not know what's happening. To be fair, a lot of constructed players wouldn't know what's happening based on layering rules. It would be kind of the timing of like what came down where and what the lands end up being. Feel free to look up that interaction, definitely. But a lot of people wouldn't know how that works, and commander players definitely don't. A lot of them run into these casual environments where it's just like they know the stack and they know this. But heck, even there was a relatively enfranchised Magic player that I played commander with, a great friend of the channel. I don't want to name and shame here, but we ran into a situation where they thought that when the stack resolved, the stack resolves completely. Like I couldn't add to the stack. They didn't know that I had a spell, they countered it. And if I let that counter resolve, once that resolved, I could re-respond. So I had a spell, they countered, I countered, they countered. 4 spells on the stack. So what they didn't realize is once their spell countered my second spell, that I could then re-respond to their first counter spell. That you have those actions going back and forth. You have to pass priority at all points. And so these are some basic things that you understand from constructed play, because in constructed play, you're in this environment, what is just mono and mono. You're just going up against that person and you want to use every single angle you have to respond to that person. Now, and to be fair, a lot of CDH players might be more aware of things like this, but the casual commander, and I was shocked by this. I was like, wow, I thought this was like a basic thing. They're like, they played this because ultimately they wouldn't have played that counterspell if they knew that interaction existed, because they knew I had more mana and way more cards and I would have been able to stop them. But they thought the whole stack would have resolved. They put me into a backward situation. I'm like, oh, I don't really care about the second spell. I can still stop your first counter spell and let my spell resolve. And so that ultimately happened. And I'm like, that is an experience that taught me that a lot of commander players, along with other experiences, don't know all the rules of Magic. And to be fair, they don't need to. They just need to know the rules within their pods and the pods they frequent and the decks that they play. But once they run around in these new situations, I find that constructed players tend to have a bigger grasp on the rules and tend to know about more situations that they can manipulate to their advantage. The best commander players I find are the ones that play constructed and play EDH a lot. Those are the best Magic players because they understand the politics of the situation. They understand how to work their way around a situation. And heck, even in constructed games, the commander players are the ones that I find can bluff the best. They can talk their way into things. They can move their hands around and like do this, do that, and bluff in a way, you know, the classic pad trick where, you know, your opponent attacks, you reach for your pen and go to your pad. That's, you know, like kind of signifying like, oh, I'm about to take the damage. And so your opponent may make a slip up and go into an attack that is kind of less incentivized and all that stuff. Like I find that the commander players and the constructed players, the ones that do both, tend to be the best at both worlds. And so I think in an LGS with a lot of just commander players, you lack variety in community growth and learning growth. You tend to have these stagnant, like kind of stalemate environments where a lot of people aren't having rule zero discussions. They're not improving their decks. They're not improving their Magic play. And again, that's just a subjective experience. But that is what I believe, you know, a community that is just playing commander. But in the poster situation, it might be different because there is a bit of CDH in there. So maybe some more enfranchised players, people that have a lot more variety in their decks. Me, myself, I have like one CDH deck, like proxied up, and I have some kind of mid high level, and I have like one like low power deck. So I like to play the variety. I like to play the whole gamut. I like to think on average, I have a good grasp of like Magic skills. My biggest dynamic fail with commander is like sometimes like forgetting the whole like 4-player thing, like forgetting sometimes that multiple players exist with multiple different things and trying to account for everything, but ultimately you can't account for everything. Someone is going to have that like trump card that they have that you're not going to be able to play around. And that is what commander is about. It's about the big moments, but having that variety is key. And I think that's what you lose in an LGS that just promotes commander or just has commander players playing in it. One thing I'll say about positivity, 2 things actually. I'll say 2 things about positivity. I specifically wanted to bring up a vending machine because one of the previous examples I listed out was the food and the physical drinks and snacks that you can sell, like people that are there for a very long time. This could be one way to monetize those commander players and bring revenue and business to you. So a lot of people are staying around. You could have, you know, very legitimate business decision of, hey, you know what, no outside food or drinks, right? If you wanted to, please feel free to step out and have that. But if you wanted to stay in here, please, you know, kind of purchase the drinks that we have here. Of course, have water if you have water and everything, if you have like a medical need or whatever, but we highly want to promote some of the snacks that we have in the store. And so that could be a great way to have those purchases in store. That's one way to monetize. And then like, you know, this is kind of a positive. This is a way to sell another angle of your store. Maybe you have some snacks that are hard to get. Maybe you have some snacks in there that are like out of country. You kind of sell them up and everything, but you know, little bit, you know, some matcha Kit Kats and everything. Like, you get some exclusive things and it could be fun in that aspect. Another thing is like I was mentioning that, you know, commander players don't buy product. Well, they do like buying precons. And so that could be another way that you can monetize, like advertise more precons, go out and look for exclusive precons, older precons, things that people are looking for. And obviously you're going to sell them at an appropriate price to your business, maybe not super oversell them, but sell them at a price that you purchase but are also able to make a profit off of, and so sell them at that, and commander players will look for that. They will look for that type of pack opening. A lot of these have packs in them, so that's packs happening, crack packing, and then they could do that with other packs in the store. And again, like, these are the type of products that commander players are looking for. And so have more of these, stock more of these commander deck boxes, not just constructed, commander deck boxes, exclusive commander products, commander tokens, like all this stuff. Like, those are the type of things that you want to orient yourself to. These are the type of commander products. Even if they're like one-time purchases, there still are a lot of commander players that will just buy a bunch of precons. If you have more commanders playing in, you have a bigger variety of commander players coming in that will look to buy these type of products. And so it's important. They may not be buying packs, but there's a lot of precons. I mean, Modern Horizons 3 had a commander set, so a commander product associated with it. You can sell commander products associated with almost every single set. There's excitement for almost every single set in terms of the commanders that get released. So put it out there. These are the type of product that they want to sell. These are the type of product they want to purchase. And that's ultimately where this kind of story ends up here. Like, I think this business owner could have made better decisions instead of hating things out. I think, like, again, emotion-driven business decisions aren't great. As I said, small businesses that operate on emotional principles rather than identified demand are generally doomed. I tend to believe that as well. I think there's ways that you can take advantage of this situation and foster a great environment, and then maybe eventually lead into constructed magic. I imagine this might be very hard for you to increase your WPN status to get other rewards and stuff, get promos, and be able to run these constructed events, because that's also the dichotomy, the one that I don't have too much more knowledge on in terms of like WPN status and the requirements for them. I just know that they're pretty strict on that, but there are other TCGs as well. You are a smaller LGS, so maybe popping into Yu-Gi-Oh, popping into One Piece, that's really popping off right now, popping into Pokemon and their product. That's a very product driven pack opening type of game out there. Again, I'm not sure of the requirements for them, but those are other popular TCGs that if you have the ability to pop into, maybe less so into Magic and pop more so into those to increase your revenue and ultimately be able to sustain yourself. So this, I thought, was an interesting post. Just wanted to kind of talk through some of it. There probably is some type of like terrible clickbait title to like get people to click into it. I apologize if you're this far in the video. You know how it is as the content creator game. I think this is an interesting situation. I hope like businesses make decisions that help like foster the game instead of like decisions like this. It doesn't always need to be constructed. You don't always need to be the Card Kingdom, the face-to-face, the SCG, whatever. You can grow in your own way and in your own spot. And I recognize that as myself as a content creator. Like, I have my own little niche that I want to exploit and expand into. And that's just what you have to do. You can copy, you can do that. The old saying of copying is, the best form of flattery and all that stuff. But when it comes to money, when it comes to success, numbers speak, and you got to increase your numbers, right? And that's where I'm going to end this video off. I'm kind of blabbering at this point. Let me know what you think of this kind of discussion. Let me know your thoughts on this LGS dying. And if you have a similar experience when it comes to your LGS, stocking commander, playing commander, whatever it might be, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'm going to sign off here.